Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Geopolitical Cousins. This recorded Monday around 2:30 p.m. U.S. Central Time. Should be up tomorrow. Who knows what's going to change by then? But as always, tried to pitch it so that it is not completely overtaken by events. Email me at jacob@jacobshapiro.com if you have questions, comments, concerns. Trade Value Index episode coming later this week. Tune in, share this podcast with everyone. Leave comments, leave reviews. Take care of the people you love. We'll see you out there. All right, listeners, we are recording. It is Monday, April 20th. It's 2:15 Central Time here in the United States. Even if producer Jacob got this out in like 5 hours, for all we know, some of these things would be OBE for those of you who are in the know, overtaken by events. But we're going to do the best that we can because I think there's lots of things to talk about here too. First of all, cousin, how was your weekend? Was it good?
It was great. The Lakers beat the Houston Rockets.
They did. LeBron digging deep into his bag, and also KD, mysterious knee injury. My God, man, come on.
No, but it was Luke Cornett. Like, let's go. Like 27 points, 5 for 5 from the three. The guy was on fire. You know.
Yeah. Also, shout out to the Orlando Magic. Did not see that one coming. So.
Wait, did I just say Luke Cornett?
Luke Cornett. No, yeah, you did say Luke Cornett.
Kennard, my bad.
Kennard.
That's how long the man has been on the Lakers. I don't even know his name, but it was a white guy.
It's okay. Yeah, there is a Luke Cornett who's a white guy, so it's fine.
Yeah, whatever. Like one can't really dribble, but whatever. It's okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to try and steer our conversation away from will the Iranians attend? Will they not attend? Will President Trump threaten to blow up the power plants? Will he not? It's just like this endless circle jerk of headlines, which I think obfuscates the real questions, which is, are ships going in and out of the Strait of Hormuz? Is there any progress in this going forward? What do the markets think? And I think to start off, cousin, why don't we take this from China's perspective? Because I don't think we've actually talked about China in the last couple of episodes, or at least not as much as it deserves talking about. And conveniently, Xi Jinping had a phone call with Mohammed bin Salman today. And the readout of the call had Xi saying that the Strait of Hormuz should, quote, remain open for normal passage, which aligns with the common interests of countries in the region and the international community, and that China advocates an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. I think there's a couple questions that we could get into. There are questions that I've been asked today already by clients, which is, how much leverage does China have here in the first place, whether on Iran or in the United States? How much is the conflict hurting China right now from an energy perspective? Because all of you out there who have this delusion that President Trump is playing 5D chess, it's, oh, well, this is all about China. The U.S. is attacking Iran and Venezuela to choke off Chinese energy supplies. Absolutely brilliant. There's that sort of messaging that is out there as well. So I know you want to take that second one first. So why don't you take it from there? But we'll try and take a step back and say, okay, Beijing is watching all of this. What does this mean for China? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? Are there some advantages, some negatives? Like, let's kind of get into it from their point of view.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that they spoke to, Saudi Arabia is important. And I think that it's important because we should note that when you look at Chinese oil imports by source as percent of their total imports, Saudi Arabia has, with Russia, been first or second for the past 11 years. Not Iran. It is not Iran. It is Saudi Arabia and Russia that are first and second. And in 2025 in particular, Iran was third, Malaysia's fourth, and some of the Malaysian, exports to China are suspected to be both Iran and Venezuela. Mm-hmm. These are shadow fleet transshipments. So Iran kind of is there with Saudi Arabia and Russia, but it's a fairly diversified import picture for China. Venezuela, by the way, is less than 5% of crude oil imports for China. Let me say that again. It's less than 5%. Iran is anywhere between 10 and 15%, depending how much of that Malaysian share is Iran. Why do I mention this? I mentioned this, cousin Jacob, because, folks out there somehow expect that all of this was designed to raise prices of oil for China, number one, illustrate to China that it is vulnerable to American interdiction efforts, or three, permanently impair China's access to crude. Let me say right off the bat, the third is stupid, stupid, stupid. Oil is a fungible commodity. That means that oil from Saudi Arabia can replace oil from Russia. Now, that is not entirely true because of refining. Refineries are tooled towards a specific type of crude. So, for example, the United States of America is very, very good at refining heavy crude, not so much the soft crude. So, what America does is it imports a lot of heavy crude from Canada and from Venezuela, which is good for its refineries. And then it ends up exporting a lot of the sweeter crude that it actually produces domestically. But the reason I mention this is like, that's not really a problem. Like, especially not for China, by the way. China can build a refinery in like a fortnight. You know what I mean? Like the Chinese are like obviously good at this stuff. It's going to cost them money, but like, let's not pretend that there's different crudes, types of oil, and that China somehow isn't a problem. That's just not the fact. So if America were to somehow magically change regime in Venezuela and Iran, if there was complete regime change in these two countries, and these two countries now refused to transact with China, unless the regimes in question were perfectly comfortable being starved to death, they would have to sell crude to someone else, correct? Like if we had a democratic Republic of Iran, and if we had, a completely right-leaning, pro-Trump Venezuela, and they still got their crude into the open market, China wins. China wins. China's good. China doesn't care. So this third kind of scenario, which I see a lot on Twitter, and a lot of people who are not in finance, all of you listening to this who are just have, like regular jobs and you don't spend all your time staring at charts of Chinese oil imports, I can see how you might be fooled into thinking that by changing the regime of Iran and Venezuela and making it impossible for them to sell oil barrels to China, that somehow America is winning. That is just false. And it's false on so many different levels. First of all, those regimes would not stop selling oil, correct? They would still sell it to somebody. Well, that somebody then doesn't have to buy oil from, say, Saudi Arabia. And then Saudi Arabia has more barrels to send to China. The only way in which China would be hurt somehow magically would be if the whole world decided to stop selling crude to China, which is just not going to happen. No, at least not without World War III. In World War III scenario, sure. And so this is really, really important. Now, there is a technical issue here, which is that Iran and Venezuela have effectively been somewhere around, 20% or 15 to 20% of China's total oil imports. There is some, benefit to changing those regimes and just forcing China to pay the real price. So China has been getting a little bit of a discount from its friends. The friends of China are sanctioned by most other countries. They can't sell oil to them. So they sell to China at a discount of about $6 to $9 per oil barrel. And so, yes, American actions have hurt China. I think that's objectively true because that discount is going to go away. So on a $60 barrel of oil, China has to pay the full price, not 54 or 55. But that's not somehow going to set China back decades. It's like, oh no. And this is the paradox of the MAGA camp. The MAGA camp is fully in line with Trump's promise that he will lower price of oil, right? He will lower it by unleashing American production, by unleashing the animal spirits of the roughneck class of American just men,
Yeah, Billy Bob Thornton and all of his merry henchmen from Landman.
Yeah.
They're all just descending on the Gulf. Like, it's coming. Come on down,
let's go, baby. This is America.
Come have some beignets with me while you're at it. You know where they're coming? They're coming to the Gulf Coast.
Just to be clear, far manlier than the two of us. Just fucking riding those F-250s, just like crushing it, There's
Well, I think I have a more flexible definition of manliness than you do, but this is neither the time nor the place to explore that.
They're just heavy male Musk coming through your television screen where you see Billy Bob Thornton come out of his F-250. But look, here's the problem. If you do that, if you unleash the American ingenuity of the shale patch, if you do that, and if oil prices go down, China is going to salute you. That $6 to $9 discount they've been getting on Iran and Venezuela, if Donald Trump gets what he wants, which is $30 barrel of oil, China's winning. In other words, I think there's a really big discount. We can go back to China and discuss its oil purchases and seaborne trade. But we also have to talk about what's in America's interests. Because aside from this very callous view that China is somehow losing, it's not, guys. It's losing, there's a marginal benefit going away. The other problem is the view that China and America are not in the same boat. Because China imports crude and America exports it. So first and foremost, America does not export crude oil. It's a net importer of crude oil. It's an exporter of petroleum products. And God bless it for that. It's one of the only developed market economies that did not just shut down all of its refineries because it's not, what's the term? Stupid. Australia, Canada, I'm looking at you both together at this time. Australia is about to run out of jet fuel. Why? You're telling me there's not parts of Australia that you're not going to be comfortable having an ugly, polluting refinery in? Really? There's not parts of Australia where you can put a refinery? For God's sakes.
This is why Mad Max was set in Australia. It's geopolitically prescient, you know? It's really good.
What are you doing? And same with Canada. Canada, come on. Like, it's embarrassing. And by the way, Mark Carney, God bless you for these new pipelines to China and other like places in the world. Awesome. But let's be real. Throw 3 ugly-ass refineries on the Great Lakes and just float the product down to the Americans. There shouldn't be a single drop of heavy crude going from Alberta to America ever, ever, ever. It should all be refined. Anyways, going back to America for a second. Energy, gas, oil, and petroleum products, at most, if you're generous, are 10% of GDP, but really closer to 5. Let's call it 7.25. Okay? So what we consider energy is less than 1/10 of American GDP. It employs 5% of the American labor force. So, you know, the leather-wearing roughnecks driving around in F-250s that I clearly have a man crush on and wish I could be them. Like, I just wish my hands were callous, you know, and not like these soft, you know, moisturized hands that I have of a strategist in macro.
I'm sure you could go get a job in the oil patch if you want.
Jacob, I would blow myself to fucking smithereens within like.
Well, maybe, but I think you could get a job if you wanted. I'm just saying.
I mean, maybe like being like, you know, the office guy. You know, like I would detract value. Like if you send me in a crew, I would like even coffee would not be well done. Anyways, look, what's my point? It's 5% of labor force. America is not an energy producer, people. If you're listening to this podcast, I really like turn on the TikTok camera right now.
Oh, we're playing a lot of bingo right now. Turn it on. It's on. It's always on. Let's be real.
Jacob, the only countries that benefit from high oil prices, the only ones on the planet, are those where a small coterie of people have the citizenship, such as the Emiratis, God bless them. Okay, there's like 400,000 of them and they're swimming in oil, and the former fishermen of Norway who stumbled into the North Sea. And then, you know, you can add the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, like, fine. You know, Brunei. How many of you listening to this know Brunei? You better, because why are you listening to Geopolitical Cousins if you don't know about the Sultan? There are very few countries where like $200 oil sounds awesome. America ain't one of them. Why? Less than 10% of the economy is energy. Less than 5% of the labor force works in energy. 70% of the American economy is just consumption. It's consumption of stuff. It's consumers consuming. And yeah, if they go and see $6.50 for a gallon of gas, which is what you have in California, or $4 in the rest of the country, they're not going to be happy about that. And they might curtail their purchases. So there is no world in which super high oil prices are good for the United States. I would argue super oil prices, there's diminishing returns. You know what I mean? Like, if oil prices are $20, is that really better for consumption than 60? No. I think America benefits with slightly elevated prices. I could make that argument. But United States of America and China are in the same boat on this issue. They just are. Because America is not some tiny Lilliputian country with 400,000 citizens and millions of barrels to export. This is a country that has to produce $35 trillion of fucking GDP through sophisticated economic activity that does not include sticking your callous, like, embossed hands with giant, manly, hairy forearms into the ground and digging shit up. Like, that is not what America does for a living as a country, okay?
Is this all reflexive AI hate? Like, you're really, it's an interesting thing that you're doing. You're talking about how this is not the sophisticated part of the American economy that makes the American economy what it is. And at the same time, you are glorifying like the hairy armed, strong arm guys who are actually doing this. And by the way, I'm not trying to throw shade at them. It's just like it's an interesting juxtaposition of the point you're making at the same time.
Well, I think we have, certain, all societies, and I'm obviously being, facetious, but like, I do think, first of all, they're cool. They're risking their lives and they're doing stuff that I could never do. Like, I mean, maybe I could be trained to do it, but I'm just not good with my hands. You know what I mean? Except if it's like a hook shot. What's up? What's my point? My point is that we do have these narratives that are completely based on false data. An infinitesimally small number of humans in America depend on the energy production and the oil patch and the shale patch. It's like if that part of the US economy just disappeared, the world, like, you wouldn't even fucking notice it. I mean, provided that some other country produced that oil, obviously. But it's not relevant. It's regionally relevant. It's not macro relevant for the United States of America. And on top of that, what is relevant is consumption. And so America is not that different from China. Both countries actually want low oil prices. But yes, maybe China wants them all lower than America.
Yeah, although Xi Jinping is not as susceptible. Well, I don't know. Would you agree with that comment? I think President Trump has more to lose from higher energy prices right now than Xi Jinping does. Would you disagree with that statement?
Well, what's crazy about that is that you're correct, but we have to explain why you're correct, right? Because so China has spent a lot over the last 5 years. It has surged filling of storage pretty much every year. And in 2025, the inventory accumulation was the strongest since 2020. Oh, gee, I wonder why. Maybe because the Chinese are, what's the word? Smart? In 2020, oil prices went negative due to the pandemic. So China did what with it? It accumulated a ton of storage. In 2025, we had low oil prices. So China has absolutely made it a national security priority to do two things. One is to store a lot of oil underground. We don't know how much. It's not publicly available information. We can just infer it from some data.
I mean, I've got a statistic here from the Center on Global Energy Policy. They estimate around 1.2 billion barrels of oil in storage. That's 104 days of coverage for them.
And that's, by the way, 104 days of like complete coverage. Obviously, non-oil imports have gone to zero. And the second thing that they've done is that EV production as percent of total production of cars in China is about to hit 50%. So China produces a lot of electric vehicles, not because it wants to save the planet. It's because it's trying to wean its economy off of oil. And it's also done storage. So in the short term, you're right. And actually, in conversations with some of my friends in the oil trading businesses over the last couple of days, it appears that China is on a buyer's strike of crude. And in fact, one of the reasons that oil prices have not gone up as much as many energy analysts expect, like our good friend Rory Johnson, who's out there like lighting himself on fire because we're all like, tra la 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 la, the world is fine. Well, one of the reasons the world is kind of okay is because China has the luxury to tell the cargoes that are supposed to go to China, no, you guys go where you're needed because we're actually fine. China is like saving the planet. China's enabling America to be tough with Iran, Jacob, in fact, by curtailing in the short term its consumption because of your point that they are, less vulnerable. Now, why is President Trump vulnerable when America produces its own oil? America has its own reserves, by the way. I would say that the difference is that in the United States of America, again, it goes back to this point that our economy is a consumer-oriented economy. China's vulnerable because it depends on us to consume their stuff. But our consumption of their stuff, our services, our digital goods, all this stuff is also predicated on people in America feeling like they should be spending money. And that's where like we don't have a strategic reserve in like cash to give to humans because that's what we run on. So if you're a listener, here's an analogy for you. We run on wages, drawdown in savings, and leverage of the American consumer. Now, you may not like it. You may want to change that. Fine, agreed. But that's what we run on. We may not run on crude, but we run on the ability of the American consumer to maintain that 70% of the GDP that is consumption and consume. During the pandemic, how do we ensure that this did not go to zero? We did it by giving stimulus checks to everyone. We are kind of out of that right now. Our fiscal space is limited. And of course, Jacob and I disagree on how much fiscal spending there may yet be added, but we both agree. But we both agree that we're not at the level of 2020 where we had plenty of fiscal room. Like those days are over. We don't have $3 to $4 trillion worth of fiscal stimulus checks like anywhere close at hand because the 10-year yield, the borrowing rate is at 4.3%. It's not at 1% that it was in the pandemic. Anyways, the point of all of this is that the strategic reserve in America is really consumption. And that's why I do agree with you that Trump is actually in the short term more vulnerable than China because Americans do care about gasoline prices, politically speaking, which is why he campaigned on $30 oil.
Well, and I'm going to take shots at both sides of the aisle here, so prepare yourselves. You're going to think this is TDS at first, but it's not. It's actually just hatred for politicians. The Biden administration drew down a lot of the strategic reserve after Russia invaded Ukraine, in part to try and manage the spike in inflation because Joe Biden was afraid of gasoline prices spiking. By the way, it didn't work. And the Biden administration never refilled the strategic energy reserve for the United States. This was something that Trump, to your point, railed about all the time on the campaign trail. What did he do when he had the power to do something? He did not refill it. He didn't do it. He said he was going to do it. He didn't do it. Not only that, he started a war with Iran, and he's releasing hundreds of millions of barrels himself because, like Joe Biden, he is afraid of gasoline prices going higher. And as a populist, he needs to make sure that everybody's happy. And guess what? It's not going to work. Look at the CPI, the most recent CPI print. That energy number is starting to creep up, and it is going to get a lot worse here going forward in the coming months. And we have this thing in the United States. They're called elections. And they matter. Leadership can change. People can go out and they can voice their disapproval with the administration and something can happen. That is not going to happen in China. It is absolutely going to happen in the midterms. And every day that this war goes on and every day that all of this insanity goes on, like we are just getting closer and closer. I don't know that I've seen a U.S. politician. I'm trying to think now. Have you seen a U.S. politician self-sabotage himself at a domestic level to this extent? I mean, I've been using the the Johnson-Vietnam metaphor lately. But I mean, President Trump, he's trying to create this reality. And yet, like, the thing that he is doing in the Middle East is going to do the exact same thing that happened with Joe Biden. And he knows it. Like, that's how he got it. Like, yeah, help me.
Look, all I would say is that, you've got to, it's an objective fact that Trump thinks low oil prices are a good thing. He campaigned on it. Like, it's not like you and I have TDS here and are trying to say that, like, we think low oil prices are a good thing, right? Like, he campaigned on this, and the whole argument for why he is better than the Democratic component is that he is good for oil production in America. And so, and then oil production will lead to, 333. This was all like, and so, yeah, I mean, like, I got nothing to disagree with you. I mean, the man himself promised low oil prices. He's now not really delivering it. To your point about the SPR, you're absolutely right. There was a little bit of refilling, but, by the end of 2025, we were at 58% full capacity. Now, you could argue that President Trump only had 12 months in which to refill it, and there was some refilling happening. But yeah, it could have been done at a much more accelerated pace.
Yeah, especially
Absolutely.
when oil was that cheap. I also just want to throw a couple statistics here. I mean, anytime you're talking about China, it's kind of mind blowing, and you have to kind of adjust. And by the way, I know people are going to push back at me. I know that China consumes 17 million barrels of oil per day, roughly. Okay, I know that. But look at a chart at China's oil production, because they've been going up and to the right themselves since 2017. They increased another almost 1.5% compared to last year. They're up to 4.5 million barrels per day themselves. They've also got refinery throughput is up, natural gas output is up 3% year on year. So they're ramping their own domestic energy production. By the way, oil, I mean, these are 2024 numbers from the IEA. So, I mean, things change that quickly in China. But you're talking about roughly 18% of total energy supply in China. Coal is still 61%, and renewables are 25%, and that number has probably gone up quite a bit. You mentioned electric vehicles. This is an incredible statistic. Electricity consumption per capita in China is up almost 600% over the last 25 years. And to your point about EVs, this was one of the most amazing things. I mean, this was in a bunch of Chinese newspapers, but I just have it from South China Morning Post, where you had the Chinese government suggesting, or industry folks in the Chinese system saying that you could have Chinese trucks go 100% electric. 100% electric for its trucking industry, which could cut fuel demand within the road transport sector by half. If you spend any time driving on American highways, imagine if every single one of those trucks that you were seeing wasn't powered by diesel or wasn't powered by gasoline, it was just electric. And China can do that because, yes, they've overbuilt because they're communists, because they've done all the state planned things. You know when it's good to be state planned and communist? When markets are no longer determining what is setting the value of commodities and things like that. When things like domestic policy and wars and supply chain disruption are causing problems. And then you get to say, hey, I have my $1 billion worth of oil reserve, whereas the United States has nothing because two old men decided that they needed to release extra barrels so that they could have a chance at winning their elections. Blah, blah, blah. Rant over.
Well, I do like the growl of my V8 as much as the next, American, I guess. But that's okay, because there's ways to reduce your oil consumption and other things. And that's your point. And I agree with you. Like, you don't need your trucks to have a nice growl of a Hemi. You can convert them to something else. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can, on the margin, start reducing the oil intensity of the economy. China has basically, over the last 15 years, this is a fascinating chart from a geopolitical perspective, since we're talking about numbers here. Chinese seaborne crude oil imports as percent of total. So these are imports of seaborne crude as percent of total imports, have gone from 90% in 2010. So in 2010, 90% of all oil that China imported was carried on ships. It went to 80% in 2025. It's actually gone back up to 82%. So it's actually a significant kind of like deviation in the trend. But it's a sharp fall in just 10 years, 10, 15 years. It's gone from 90 to 80%. It's going to go lower, guys, because of this combination of pipelines that they're building actively, but also because of EV. They're shifting so that they aren't as vulnerable to the US and to the US interdiction efforts. And so this is where like what we're basically telling you, if you're listening to this, if you're watching Fox News, right now there's this sense like, well, we're safe from this. No, you're not. You're not safe from oil prices at all. Like the US economy is a consumption economy. We're not 400,000 Emiratis chilling in our air-conditioned mansions waiting for the oil proceeds to come in. That is not what the US is about. Many Americans, most Americans, do really care if gasoline prices get to $4 or $5 a gallon. It's game over for many of them because they live on the margin. And so that's the first issue. The second, so politically, hell no. And the second issue is that the Chinese are definitely prepared to weather these short-term spikes in oil prices. Are they better than we are, Jacob? I would say no, but they're good enough. And because they don't have elections, yeah, like they'll deal with 6 months of $100 oil price, but will we? Can President Trump deal with it?
The pain threshold is radically different. Like it's just you can't compare apples and apples. But this also goes back to
they got public transportation in their cities. Sorry to interrupt, but they have public. There's other reasons why the Chinese economy is probably going to be fine with a mix of some self-imposed pain and reserves.
Well, and just remember how this conversation started. Like the question started with, is China exposed to these Middle Eastern oil disruptions as a result of the Strait of Hormuz? And there is this facile argument, I hope we've proven it to be facile, that no, the United States exports energy, so it's better. Just remember that it's the Trump administration itself. And here, I will give credit. I will give credit to them. They were the ones that were the first ones to really call out, how much dependence we have on China in terms of our critical minerals. You go through, look at rare earths and graphite and tungsten and all these different things. Look at the value added share for supply chains where U.S. consumption dependence is dependent on China. It's gone up to almost 20% overall. It's almost 50% in manufacturing for electronics, almost 60% when talking about textiles. The shirt I'm wearing right now is made in China. I wouldn't have it if it wasn't made in China. Like they are part of it. And the Trump administration knows this. This was their justification for their whole critical minerals list and the tariffs and the Section 232 and the Section 301 and all the things that they've done on China, which I might even agree with them as forward thinking. And yet we're supposed to agree with the kabuki theater that, we've stopped Venezuelan and Iranian oil going to China. Game over for China. You know what's game over? If China doesn't get any oil, let's say it's 0 barrels to China. You know who's really going to be screwed? We are.
Of course.
All the things that we consume in our daily lives come from China. Good luck doing anything. Good luck giving your kid ibuprofen. Good luck buying children's toys. Good luck buying a computer. Good luck buying a cell phone. Like all of this stuff comes from China, and it comes incredibly cheap because of globalization and free trade and things like that. But sure, great. Venezuela and Iran. That's really going to stop it. I can't.
No, you're so right. I mean, like, of course, if we had followed Howard Lutnick's diet of just severe recession, moving everything to America, and then close the Strait of Hormuz, fine. But that's just not going to happen. Like,
I want to see Howard Lutnick try to grow bananas in the United States. Don't talk to me about tariffs on bananas until you've planted them here and grown them, Howard.
So look, what I'm trying to
spicy today. Sorry.
What I'm trying to say, I am too. I'm spicy in different ways. Like, so like, look, look. The point of all of this is, could America be a completely isolated economy that doesn't trade with the rest of the world? Yeah, it has most commodities. If you include Canada and Mexico, sure. But the effort to do that is so egregiously high that the Chinese would have to be like brain-eating alien life force for you to want to attempt it. And this is where, is the effort worth it? And the answer is no. And if you come back at me and say the CPC is going to brainwash us all and blah, 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 fine. Then, like attempt it, but try winning an election on that platform. It ain't going to happen. Now, let's step back a little bit. And I do want to say, here's how all of this ends up being 5D chess. I'll give it to you. I'll put on my TDS DS hat, right? Here is how. The Chinese are not stupid. So anybody who out there says like, okay, guys, fine. We understand the math that you used as evidence for your arguments. Sucks. Jacob and Marko have like math at their fingertips. But like, this was still a good thing for America because the US illustrated to China the vulnerability of getting oil from Hormuz. I would counter to that by saying like, well, they're not dumb. I've been telling my clients for the last 7 years that they're vulnerable to interdiction of Hormuz. It's why I've expected them to surge EV production. Like the Chinese are not stupid people. They can look at a map and they can be like, oh, we get most of our oil from here. Oh, what does the America have in Bahrain, the Fifth Fleet? I wonder why. It's to interdict it. It's not to protect oil flows through the Hormuz Strait, and now we know. But fine, let's just say that the Chinese needed a live fire demonstration of American capabilities that they somehow didn't believe. Here's how Trump could twist this into a success. And I would want to do this. If I was advising to Trump in the Trump administration, if I was part of the negotiations, China and America are about to have 4 meetings, Jacob, over the course of this year, which is a lot.
Well, I was going to ask you one of my questions that I wanted to ask you, because you've been much further on the curve than this. Like, do you think the next meeting is still on? Because if that meeting is on, Trump is tacoing. That's like my biggest indicator. If he pushes that meeting back, then I think we're in real trouble for the global economy. But as long as that meeting is on the books, I'm eating tacos every night. That's where I'm at. But I wanted to ask you that.
I mean, I think that's a good point. No, Jacob, I think that's a good point. I think I agree with you, although I do think he can chew gum and walk at the same time. But so I can't guarantee that you're right, but I like the way you're thinking. Yes. But let me go back to this point. Now that America has demonstrated the vulnerability of Hormuz for China, the master 5D chess move, or fine, maybe 3D chess move, will be to just offer China to become its main supplier of crude. Like, that's what should happen. Okay? That makes sense. And you know why? Because it's perfect. Like, China and the United States of America need deeper economic relationship, both so that they don't go to war, but also because if they do go to war, then they can one-up each other. So China right now has this very critical, sword of Damocles over the US, which is the rare earth mineral sort of refining. Don't worry, the West will resolve that in 5 to 10 years. I have no doubt. Like, this is a serious effort, and they will lose that leverage on the US.
Yes, in 5 to 10 years. Yes.
Agreed. No, of course. So how does America counter it? Well, one of the things is hey, you guys need advanced chips. Okay, so there's kind of a detente now being established between China and the US on this. But why not add more sources of both symbiotic relationship that can grease the wheels of better relationship, but also you start throwing some more swords of Damocles. So if I was in the Treasury Department, if I was, working with President Trump, I would go into these meetings saying look, you don't know what Yahoo in the Middle East, Israelis, Iranians, is going to close the straits. You don't know what we're going to do because we're crazy, as you just saw. You know what I mean? Hey, guilty as charged. We're fucking crazy. But how about we just ship you all our crude? How about we become your supplier? How about you start buying more of our LNG and because then we are starting to create a relationship based on critical supplies. And yes, it makes you vulnerable to us, but it also makes us vulnerable to you on other things like ibuprofen or critical drug components, so this and that.
I know, but I hear what you're saying, but I can spin that a different way, which is to say, China doesn't want the advanced chips. It's building domestic capacity for its own chips and slowly chipping away at Taiwan over the long term in order to get rid of that advantage too. So we're not offering them anything that is difficult or that is value added. We're offering them our soybeans or our oil. And apologies to Scott Bessent and the other soybean farmers out there and the oil roughnecks and everything else. That's China not treating us with terms of critical supplies. That's China treating us like a gas station. That's they're doing the advanced stuff, the actually commanding heights of the future economy. And we're providing them the things from the previous century just because we have it lying around. That's not how you get an innovative economy that's going to continue to keep pace and be at the forefront of all these things.
I know, but come on, yes, the US also depends on them, maybe not as a gas station, but a refinery. They do all the dirty work of extracting critical materials from rare earth.
Yeah.
And they send it to us so we can advance our AI supercomputers. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of like go both ways. My point to you is just that it's okay. It's okay. It's better than nothing, Jacob. You know, like if they don't want to buy Microsoft Office and we don't want to buy their EVs, it's okay if the relationship is built on natural resources. It's
I would actually push back. I'm not sure it's okay. And here I'll put on my hat as an American. I'm not sure it's okay if what you want is American strength. And this is the problem when, the U.S. is not by any means a perfectly market-based economy, but you have a market-based economy that is dealing with a non-market-based economy. And so China is saying, we don't care how much it costs, we're going to electrify. And we don't care how much it costs, we're going to produce these chips inside of China because we absolutely have to. And anybody who disagrees, we'll send you to Xinjiang or any one of our re-education camps so that you can get back up to speed. Whereas in the United States, for mostly for better, but when you're in this type of competition with a potential peer rival, for worse, if you don't have your policy together, we're not doing that. So what we do is we cede the things that the market is going to go to China because they're going to be able to produce it more cheaply, and that's where the rest of the world is going to go. Meanwhile, we are losing the capacity to do those things, but we have natural resources and materials, which makes us look like Argentina and Brazil and all these other countries in the Western Hemisphere that have been taken advantage of by imperial powers for centuries because they over-indexed on their resource wealth and never went anywhere with it. That's the atrophy that's happening, and there's no plan either from the Biden administration or the Trump administration to deploy industrial policy in a way that honors American market economics and also deals with China as a strategic competitor.
Well, I mean, I would say that the advent of AI, which is almost an exclusively an American story. Now, I understand
and China will steal that too, and they'll be ahead of us too very soon.
Well, I mean, like,
no?
Well, so I think that you are correct in terms of like industrial goods. But in terms of consumer electronics and software, I mean, America has led the way.
I mean, software, whatever. Like AI can recreate that, and the Chinese can learn how to do that. And there's also like how fast. I mean, how long does it take us to create data centers, and at what cost? I know that we have lots of natural resources, but we don't have enough electrification and enough grid infrastructure to do all the glittering things we're going to do. Whereas China just does that like it's nobody's business. Just look at the number of nuclear reactors they've churned out versus what we have. I mean, like, you start to build all this up. Like, I don't like a world that ends with, oh, here you can have our oil, victory for America. Like, that's not victory for America. That's defeat, I think.
Well, I don't think it's a 1 or 0. The reason I brought it up is that there are ways to deepen the interaction of the two economies so that both sides have red lines or like swords of Damocles on one another. I definitely don't see it as a win. I don't see it as a win. But I don't think it's exclusive. Like, you're painting a picture of an America that's become focused on natural resources to the exclusivity of other things. But that hasn't really happened, right? Like, I mean, there's been innovation in America despite the boom in natural resources.
There has been. And that's, we can talk about the long-term ramifications of pulling funding from universities and RFK Jr. and things like that. The reason that this hasn't showed up more yet is because the initial knowledge that has left has been the low-level stuff. It's the furniture and the ibuprofen and the blah, 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 and the children's toys. Nobody's like, I mean, the folks who are in those industries, they're mad. They're Trump supporters. That's the backwoods of West Virginia. That's these places that have been really angry at the system for not helping them when the system was yanked out from underneath their teeth. And that's why you get the sort of populist reaction. But as you start to ascend value, and it's starting to happen, if you look at the things that China is starting to get better at us then,
sure,
and which countries are going to China for, it's disturbing. And, you're right that it's not a 0 or 1. I'm like simplifying there. But, we're the cousins. We're nerds. We do a lot of Dune. But I think this is actually where Star Trek might be the better metaphor, because the Chinese are the Borg. Do the Borg innovate? Do they create technology? No, they assimilate it. And then they assimilate you because you become dependent on their things. That's what the Chinese are doing. They are assimilating the US economy. And the US economy, like selling oil to the Borg don't care. Sure, they'll take the oil. They're going to take the oil anyway, but you're not going to defeat the Borg unless you figure out how to out-innovate the Borg. And what the United States has been doing since Obama and the original tire chicken trade war, go back and Google it if you need to, is not a viable strategy in dealing with the Borg.
Well, and that's where I think your point about education is critical. But again, I would argue that that's not the fault of the natural resource boom, right? I mean, this is all policy choices. And I mean, you agree with me, obviously. Like, it's not like America has a resource curse, because it's just resource production. To have a resource curse, production has to be a much greater share of GDP than it is for the US. Like, the US dollar is not gyrating based on the oil price. It just isn't.
Historically, that is true. Every other, like, you're talking about Dutch disease, and most of the literature on Dutch disease says that the resource has to be the primary thing, or has to be a major source of revenue. I have been wondering with the United States if that's true. I'm wondering if you can have like a small Dutch disease that slowly starts to, like,
I mean, you definitely have
other
regional.
parts of the body.
You definitely can have it regionally, but like, it's just, the US economy is 35 trillion. Like, you just, I think we could produce all of the world's oil. I don't think it would get to a point where it would matter. That's how big the US economy is. Okay, I'm being hyperbolic. That probably would matter. But look, what I would say is that it's worse than that. It's worse. Your point is even more cogent. And the reason I say that is because if we could blame the Dutch disease or the natural resource curse, so countries that produce a lot of a single commodity, they're basically, the currency goes up, and then it makes all of the other parts of their economy no longer competitive with the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So because that's not happening, Jacob, your point is more cogent, because it's just policy decisions that have led us down the path where, China has a lead on drones and so on. On the other hand, like, look, people are trying to address that. I think both the Biden administration and Trump administration are trying to do it in some way, shape, or form. I don't think the tariffs are a way to do it. In fact, they could backfire. For those of you interested on this topic, I mean, we did a whole thing last year on tariffs and manufacturing. I think it's a really dangerous tool to use. Once you start using tariffs, man, it's so tempting to just jack up tariffs and hope that people will buy GM and Ford cars. Competition is much better for this. It just is. And yeah, competition from China may be unfair, but that's where you just got to put your faith in the fact that in the long term, capitalism wins. But it's got to be actual capitalism. It can't be this oligopolic bullshit that we have in America where, like, lobbyists kind of like stifle innovation and like new sources of ingenuity. And you cannot then stop investing in higher education and lower education too, or stop attracting the best immigrants. I mean, ask Elon Musk about this. Like, think about what Elon Musk did. Despite all the regulatory pressures, he created a car company, man, in the 21st century. Who the fuck does that? Nobody. Tell me a car company that just showed up. Well, China's got a bunch of them, and guess what? They're copying him. Like, they're copying him. They're not copying BMW.
They assimilated him, by the way, and now they do it better than him. The Borg.
I'm not sure that they do it better than them.
They do. They do.
We'll see. We'll see.
Let listeners who are out, I know that we have listeners who are in this space. I'm sure of it. Please email us and let's do some test drives. Or if not, like, I know somebody who will take us to like Chinese car factories that they're better. Trust me.
I've been in a Geely Seal, I believe it is. Or who makes the Seal? Let me just find. Is it Geely or is it somebody else? Oh, BYD. My bad. Of course it's BYD. Yeah, Geely is actually old school. They're not the new school. So BYD makes the Seal. It's clearly a copy of Tesla. And I mean, it feels cheap inside. I also don't own a Tesla. I kind of feel Tesla feels cheap inside too. They're cheaper and so on. But one thing that's happening in China with their EVs is that the reason they're better is that they're significantly cheaper than American. But that is a function of just like them going for broke. There will be consolidation in the EV space in China, and when that happens, the prices will rise.
Yeah,
like that's
and it'll be brutal. But
yeah, it'll be brutal for them and for their companies and for their investors who bet Like there's hundreds of EV companies in China. That is unsustainable, man. No country on planet Earth.
I mean, this is what There Will Be Blood about. Just like there were hundreds of guys looking for oil all around the United States, and eventually it just came down into a couple oil companies. That's what real capitalism looks like. Although in the Chinese case, there was a state-led push for it, and now they're letting the market.
Now they're letting the market. But look, at the end of the day, BYD is not going to sell the seal for under market. Like eventually they're going to do what everybody else does, enshittification. Like this isn't that much different, you know. Anyways, look, the point is, I don't think that the competition with China is impossible. I think that is not true. Like the fact of the matter is that on the thing that they're the best at, EVs, America invented that. And what I would go further than that is like the United States of America can continue to be on the edge. And if the Chinese take 20 years to catch up to the US on everything Americans invent, that's fine. Just be ahead of them 20 years. But that requires your first point, which is you cannot cut funding for critical education. You cannot cut funding for that. And you cannot stop making America the premier place for the highly educated immigrants to come to. Like those two things I think are critical.
Yeah, which is the perfect place to land the plane. For those of you playing geopolitical bingo, take a drink. Which goes back to the beginning, which is I agree with you. I think the United States could compete, but the way to compete is not by attacking Iran and Venezuela so that China can't have Iranian and Venezuelan oil. If you're going to do that, you are going to lose, and the Borg are going to assimilate you.
100%. Wait. But let me just you misspoke, right? We got to be very precise because people are listening to this. All we did is invade Venezuela and Iran so that China cannot get a $6 discount.
Yeah, right. Sorry.
Because they will get the fucking crude. This is the guys, listen to what I'm saying. Listen to the words exiting my mouth. It's a fucking fungible commodity. And no, I don't give a shit about refineries. I don't. Of all the countries on the planet, the one country that doesn't give a shit about crude grades is China, because they can have thousands of refineries tomorrow. So no, unless America is prepared to just destroy 20 million barrels of production, China will get the crude. They'll get the crude. They'll get Saudi crude. They'll get Nigerian crude. If America imports more Venezuelan, if Europe gets more Iranian, China will get Brazilian and Saudi. There is nothing that America did other than take away a $6 discount China got from Maduro and maybe Iran. Like slow clap.
Yeah. This is tangential, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but did you see the Wall Street Journal report about the UAE potentially opening talks with the US about a currency swap line? Did that one cross your desk? Because when you
I did not,
when you couple that with the MBS is on the phone with Xi Jinping, and maybe you have to pay the Strait of Hormuz toll to the Ayatollahs, but in yuan.
Yeah.
Like there's just I don't have the point. I'm like grasping at the shadows of a point there. But I'm asking that because, and I already sort of showed my cards here. Like I think the U.S. China summit happens in a couple of weeks. I think Trump tacos. I think he'll have a deal that by any objective measurement is going to suck. It'll be like a lesser version of the JCPOA, and it'll be branded Trump, but Trump will do his Jedi mind trick and try and claim victory on it, and the strait will open. I mean, obviously it could go the complete opposite direction. By the time listeners are listening to this, I might look like an idiot, but that's still where I'm going. But things that would push against that would be if that China meeting gets canceled. That report about the Emirates potentially reaching out for a currency swap, I sat up in my chair a little bit and I was like, well, does that mean they think the war is going to go on for weeks longer? Like, why is the UAE tapping the United States for a currency? So I just wanted to take your temperature on that one, because that one got my attention.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a credit line for US dollars specifically, so you can buy imports and stuff like that without having to liquidate your investments, without having to go to the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority and saying like, hey, can you guys re-up me? I don't think it's a big deal, but I do know I did actually see it on Twitter, and it was more like, haha, you guys thought petrodollars are going away. And I'm like, well, did you know what central bank the UAE already has a swap agreement with? It's PBOC, and has had it for a while. So actually, they renewed that one. I just checked online in 2023. So they've had it before. I think that I don't think it's really an evidence that the war is going to go on for longer, but it is evidence that they want a credit line in case they need dollars right away for critical purchases, which makes a lot of sense for a country that imports a lot of goods.
Okay. I think we should get out of here on this. Well, I'm going to lob one thing up that I've been watching, and then we can either riff on it or maybe you lob something else that you're watching because listeners seem to like that as well. And this is adjacent to what we're talking about because this is very quiet. If the Iran war was not happening, this might be one of the things that people would be talking about more than anything else. Is the continued deterioration of the China-Japan relationship. We talked about this with Cousin Gherkin when he was last on the podcast, and actually one of his clips of him talking about that went viral. Like hundreds of thousands of people watched him talking about Japan-China relations on our podcast. I felt bad because it was like the viewers were coming to us, but it was all Cousin Gherkin cooking.
I mean, he is good looking. He is a good looking man,
He is. I mean, there's no denying that. But you start to, it started with Takaichi and her comments about Taiwan and China making a big deal out of it. But Takaichi has since had her landslide election. But if you just look at some of the things that have happened in the last couple of days, you've got Japan not joining this Philippine-U.S. drill in the South China Sea, but significantly committing way more forces to it and agreeing to do a lot more. You've got China maybe blocking the entrance to the Scarborough Shoal. Then you had the LDP put out a new vision statement. That's the ruling party in Japan, which included constitutional revision as one of the main things they're going to push for. And Takaichi gave a speech about how she was going to push for this, which was a little surprising for me. I thought she was going to deal with some of the economic issues and then do constitutional revision, but it looks like she's pushing in parallel. By the way, her approval ratings are sky high despite the high energy prices, which I also thought was interesting. And then I don't know if you also saw this, Japan a couple of days ago offered up to $10 billion to support other Asian countries procure energy resources and bolster their stockpiles as the Strait of Hormuz continues to be closed. Now, part of that is, of course, that Japan is exposed to, a lot of their supply chains are spread out among some of these countries. But just another, muscular is the wrong word, but Japan being very assertive. And the question I have, or that I've been circling around that I don't have a good answer for, is what is China going to do in response to this? Because the China-Japan economic relationship is very linked. And even when Shinzo Abe was banging this drum back when he was prime minister of Japan, he had an amazing ability to have good relations with Xi Jinping, but then also push on the Japanese nationalist front. Either Takaichi doesn't have the same magic pixie dust or something has changed in China and they're not interested in it. And the tensions are still there. They have not quite escalated to really affecting the Chinese-Japanese economic relationship. But I mean, just all of these little blips when you're thinking about what's going on in the relationship starting to look a little different. And I'm wondering, does that mean that relationship breaks apart, which would be a huge deal for supply chains in the region, for Japan-US relations? Like, it's hard to overstate what a big deal that would be. Can they be friends and enemies at the same time? One of my favorite books about Japan is by John Toland. And he talks about how in the West, you're either with us or you're against us. The Japanese can be like, well, you're with us and you're against us. And this all makes sense as they smile to you as they say it, right? Like they don't have the same hang up on you're with us or you're against us stuff. But I just wanted to throw that in, and feel free to riff on that or feel free to bring your thing. But that I think is something that has gone not unnoticed because it's in newspaper articles, but probably none of you have gotten to like page 6 where it's actually being talked about. But I think it's an increasingly a big question for what the aftermath of all this is going to look like and how Japan is going to respond to the energy crisis that's been created by what the Trump administration is doing in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to take that stuff very seriously. And, I mean, nuclear really is the only option for Japan and Europe. And for Japan, I think nuclear means a lot more than just power plants, I think, given the tensions with China. But I do think that they can be frenemies. I do think that's possible. And it's all going to depend on Taiwan. I mean, and that's what she said. Takaichi she pointed that out. A military action by China on Taiwan would have to be responded to by Japan. I mean, that's what caused the diplomatic crisis between the two of them. And I think she's correct. And I think that the visit that we discussed in a couple of podcasts ago by opposition leader to Beijing, that was an important visit, because I do think that if China and Taiwan can land the plane on their relationship, it would smooth everyone in the region. But that's obviously, a big if.
Yeah.
I do have something that I wanted to bring up. I spent last week in Washington, D.C. Not a whole week, but several days visiting clients and policymakers. And I just wanted to say, I would never say what I heard or learned from people on a podcast. Obviously, I've never really found insights from policymakers that useful. In fact, some of my biggest calls, the whole book that I wrote, Geopolitical Alpha, is about this. My framework is top down, it's not bottom up. I generally think that when people talk about like intelligence in the private sector, they're just full of shit. It is very, very difficult to build that kind of a analytical framework. Very difficult to get the volume of insights that you would in an actual intelligence firm. So I do like talking to policymakers. It's cool. You see what they're struggling with. Some of my best calls in my career came after talking to super senior people who told me that X would happen. And I was like, fuck that. I don't believe you. I think Y is going to happen. And I was right. But one thing that came out of this trip, though, is just how different the views were of American policymakers. And some pretty senior ones. Everything from like Iran's going to get invaded, like soon, to like the deal is likely. And so it just made me, like I've always often thought whether my framework of focusing on material constraints is going to dissipate in its value when you have a charismatic leader. So Max Weber, for those of you who are not political science nerds, like God bless you. But Max Weber, aside from writing The Protestant Work Ethic, which is like sick, he also wrote this essay on like where does legitimate authority come from? And it's a really good essay. Like he talks about traditional authority. It's like, king. Then there's the charismatic authority, which comes from the charisma of the leader themselves. And then it's the legalistic authority. I forgot what he calls it, but it's like an authority that doesn't come from the leader, but from the institutions, the laws, the constitution. And I've often thought whether the constraint framework I elucidated in Geopolitical Alpha is not going to work with someone like Donald Trump because it's so much about charisma. And therefore, sort of the people who are in the smoke-filled rooms then become better at their job than me because they're closer to the charismatic leader, right?
Yeah.
Not worried about it. Not worried about it. After a couple of days in DC, I'm like, no, I'm good. Why? Because Jacob, it was such diametrically opposed views. And all high-level officials close to President Trump, like, it's just very clear to me that the United States of America is basically being run by, like, one guy. And God bless him, he won a landslide election. Right? Landslide. Yeah, maybe the greatest victory ever. Certainly bigger than 2016. So he's got the Democratic mandate. He feels empowered by it. But the point is that every single day, the people that are in government, they cannot provide you with insights because they themselves don't know. And I'll just give you one example of this. I spoke to an official at one of the very important departments. And the point was, we had a task force for something. Mm-hmm. And I was like super excited because this task force is very important to one of the views I've had. Like, oh my God, there's a task force for this. And he was like, yeah. And then we had to kind of shove it aside because it just didn't work out. And also we got like overtaken by events, by other things. Mm. And that's what I mean. It's a very helter-skelter approach to, to leadership and policymaking, which is very much in line with the experience of other regimes throughout history with charismatic leadership. And that's what Max Weber would have told if he was here on our podcast. Professor Weber would have been like, yeah, that's the difference between legal, authoritative, leadership and charismatic one. It's more helter-skelter, which means that it's very difficult to actually be close to people close to Trump because they don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows until he fires off that tweet. Only he does. And I think that's something I found out over the last week, just spending time in DC. It's going to be very, very difficult for anyone who tries to sell research or consulting based on connections with the administration. It's going to be very difficult for them to be consistent because there is no consistency, and a lot of it is just in the mind of the beholder, and the beholder is Trump.
Yeah, in some ways, it's a more pure form of material constraint. Yeah, I mean, I used to talk about this last year. It's sort of, and I'm really curious if this continues with future presidencies or if it's just unique to Trump. It's the death of the bureaucratic presidency.
Yes.
And it's the return of, I mean, it's sort of like a court. It's sort of like you're going to court and there's a king and you have your court jester, Howard Lutnick, and you have all these different folks that are moving in and out who are trying to gain favors and come in and come out versus that. And President Trump listens to them and then he goes off and drinks a Diet Coke and he makes his decision, but the decision might be something else the next day. Almost like, the Mark Twain book, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. I haven't quite figured out how to apply that to kind of what Trump is. But there is this kind of element to it. And it's, I mean, when I said in the last, I think it was the last episode or the episode before that, where I was like, I just don't want to talk about Trump anymore. I don't want to talk about Trump anymore because I have no clue what he's going to do. You don't know what he's going to do. The interviewer on CNBC who's going to interview me tonight and ask me this question, I'm going to tell them, you don't know what he's going to do, and I don't know what he's going to do. So why are we pretending like we know what he's going to do? I know what's going to happen 3 years from now based on what he is doing. I'm like very certain about that. But he could do something completely different tomorrow, and the only people are going to know are going to be the people in the court who actually talked to him at that particular point in time. And it'll be really interesting to see, is this how presidential politics works in the future? Or does the next president have to rebuild the infrastructure from the ground up? And I don't know the answer to that question, but it'll be interesting to watch.
I think there's a generational change. And I do think even if Democrats come into power, it's going to be very tempting. Like, it's tempting to have this kind of executive power. It just is. Biden was all about returning to experts. Remember when he unveiled his cabinet?
Yeah.
And then, there's Blinken, there's Yellen, they all have PhDs, and went to all, and the rest of us were like, cool, we don't care. Number one, they're probably going to be wrong at their job. And they were. I think both Yellen and Blinken were objectively terrible at their job.
Yeah, but they were predictable.
Yeah, they were, but also they kind of were. But I would argue that what you said earlier, it's a pure form of constraints. It does work. That it's the only thing that works. The only framework you have. See, when the leadership is erratic and unconstrained, that's when you need the constraint framework more. It's like when you can sit down with an undersecretary of Treasury in a private club in DC. That's the world where the bureaucracy matters. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that actually today with Trump is where you need to be more framework-oriented and constraint-oriented, because the path of least resistance is still matters, because Trump may not listen to his bureaucracy, but he's still subject to the material constraints of the real world.
And this is also one of the things, the biggest differences between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration that I think people don't appreciate, because the first Trump administration was trying to be a bureaucratic presidency. Now, it failed because Trump ate his own and they were all arguing with each other. But think about those first cabinet officials: Mattis, McMaster, Tillerson, Mnuchin. You go down the list, Gary, you go down the list, okay, they're not the liberal PhDs that Joe Biden gravitated towards, but they would have been at home in any Republican administration. They were pretty good choices, and most of them had respect in a lot of different ways. Michael Flynn was the real weird one, and he didn't last because Congress was that's.
I don't know if that was Congress. It was more like the intel services that burned him. But yes.
Whatever it was. The second Trump administration is not like that.
No, yeah.
And I think the media in particular, or observers or listeners, they're trying to convince themselves, yeah, but Scott Bessent is here and Marco Rubio's. These are the adults in the room. And I think it's a fundamentally different thing. I think Trump said, you know what, my first administration didn't go well because I tried to do it Washington's way. I'm going to do it my way. So Marco, Scott, Peter Navarro, dance for me. Do a song, do a jig. I want to see what you have to do. And then, if I like you, I'll empower you. If not, I'll choose something else. He's doing it to JD Vance right now. Oh, JD, go negotiate in Pakistan for me. If you do, literally what he said, I don't know if it's word for word, but he basically said, if you do well, I'll take all the credit. And if it fails, it's all on you.
Yeah, I love it.
That's what kings do. That's literally like what any king does with his counselors,
At least he's honest, No, but listen, on a serious note.
At least he's honest. Yeah. Yes. You got me.
I got you on that one. On that one case, I got you. No, listen. I think there's still some semblance of the first term, like with tariffs. I think, again, President Trump turns to Scott Bessent when things start going wrong with Howard Lutnick's tariff plan, obviously. When the 10-year yield sells off massively, he's like, what the fuck is going on? Scott, fix it. The problem, that the one thing I fear is that the first administration had a lot of generals. This is my concern. A lot of generals, even in positions where they weren't needed, like chief of staff, general, national security advisor, general. That they're thin on the generals. And I'm not somebody who glorifies the military at all. I'm not. But a general can explain why 8 Arleigh Burke destroyers is just not enough. Fuck, if Marko Papic, who's read every Tom Clancy book when he was 12, can explain that, I'm pretty fucking sure. No, obviously General Kane, there's people in the military. The problem with the people in the military is that they're not in the White House with him all the time. So his chief of staff this time around is a political operator. And I respect Susan Wiles. I think she's really good. She's great at taking people out in the back and shooting them in nice exposés in various liberal press, which is very interesting. And I salute her for her Machiavellianism. This is probably the most powerful, completely unknown person in America. But again, she's beneficial for the administration, and I would say for the country. The thing is, though, she's not a general. His national security advisor is not a general. It's Marco Rubio, actually. He's got 2 hats. So I think there's just fewer people who know the military around Trump. And I think that this is what happened. Obviously Pete Hegseth is there, but if you talk to even the military brass, they'll tell you certain things on our Secretary of War.
You don't need the military brass to know that Crystal Meth Rumsfeld is absolutely insane. And he's also been firing generals who are those normal, sober, methodical, bureaucratic, respect process, respect authority. He's looking for the yes men. And then Hegseth is the ultimate yes man and just telling Trump, yeah, you blew him up. You got him. We're lethal. We're awesome. We're everything. Let's pray.
Look, I think, yeah, let's pray. Listen, I think the problem is, I had this thesis that I articulated on our podcast, which was semi-joke and then became an actual investment recommendation to my clients. The Chuck Norris premium, after Venezuela was executed, the greatest special forces operation in history, that's going to forever stay on Pete Hegseth's resume. Sorry, Jacob. I know it pains you, but since the Greeks went into the Trojan War, no one has executed a better special forces operation than what happened in Venezuela.
Okay. It was good. Okay, it wasn't that good. But it was good. It was very good.
Listen,
I will go do some homework and get you 10 more that are better. But fine.
Entebbe wasn't as good. Fucking Uganda. Come on, bro. Uganda in the 70s.
Ooh, you've already Entebbe was definitely as good. Are you kidding?
No way, man. Come on.
Don't shortchange Yoni Netanyahu like that.
No, man, God bless him.
How different history would have been if Yoni Netanyahu had not died. Anyway, don't get me on that.
Listen, it's just fucking 70s Uganda. You know what I mean? That's anyways, doesn't matter. Look, the point is,
you want to go hang out with Idi Amin? These are crazy people. And then you got some terrorists in there. It's a whole
Cubans, and you took the head of state. Not tourists in a hangar, the head of state in a fortress. Anyways, look.
I will do some homework. But fine, yes, he gets that on his resume. I'm not worried because the rest of his resume is so awful.
But that's what I'm getting at. We shouldn't debate this or argue about it because where I'm landing the plane on this is not positive.
I'm sorry.
It's the greatest special forces operation, I think, ever in human history. And then you don't have the breaks. you can't pump the brakes and be like, okay, but Iran is different. And that's where, like, where were the generals? Where were the adults in the room to say, like, hey guys, like, look, Venezuela, hey, God bless you. Amazing operation, but like, it's gonna be, you can't just expect everyone to be Chuck Norris. And that is what, and you know what? I floated this thesis by folks I talked to last week in DC. Nobody really disagreed with my logic in terms of why we're in Iran. Nobody really was like, hey, Marko, let me tell you, man, we've been preparing for Iran for 8 months. You're wrong. Had nothing to do with Venezuela. Yes, maybe it greased the wheels of our confidence, but you're incorrect. We were on this. Nobody said that. Everyone just kind of like looked away sadly and stared into space as they asked for another double. You know what I mean? Like, nobody was like, you're off base.
I guess we should be grateful that he did this with Iran and not North Korea. Is that the silver lining?
I mean, is it? I mean, maybe it would have worked in North Korea. At least, like, I don't know.
No, I think it would have been much worse. I think a lot more people would have died.
All right. Yeah, you're probably right. No, yeah.
Oil prices would have stayed low.
Hey, amen to that. But the problem in that case, the problem with North Korea is that all the artillery that would have just mowed down Seoul. But like, listen, I think like just should have stuck, like should have listened to you. I mean, look, bring the TikTok camera on again. Like, look, President Trump, you should just listen to Jacob. He gave you the layup, man. It
was there.
You took off from the free throw line and just yanked it on Venezuela. Crazy dunk. And then Jacob set you up for a fucking layup, and it was over Cuba, 5'2" guard. You were just going to swat him away, but you were like, nah, I dunked on the power forward. Now I'm going to dunk on the 7'6" Wemby. That's what you did, but the layup was right there.
He was Lance Stevenson blowing LeBron James's ear at this point. But don't worry, like Lance is going to try again. Like Cuba's not done. Like he's definitely coming back around.
Cuba's going to be there. Cuba's always going to be there. What did Trump say? We're going to pick up Cuba on the way home. Did he say that?
Yeah, I believe so. And I think he said, I will be honored to take over this country. He's funny too. I'll give him that. He's honest and he's funny.
No, he's got a good sense of comedy, I think. What though? But like, remember when you and I talked about, oh, by the way, this is a preview for all of you. If the world doesn't end by Thursday, we are going to record our next trade value. So we're going to do the leadership trade value. I keep calling it the draft. It's not. It's the trade value index.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So just hopefully tune in for that. We're going to put some time and effort into thinking about the best 30 leaders, and then we're going to use advanced mathematics to combine our lists.
Very advanced.
Very advanced. But one thing I wanted to say, remember one of the reasons that we both liked Schimbaum? That
I remember several, but what's the one you're circling on?
Well, one of the ones that we both landed on is that she could throw shade at Trump in like a coquettish, fun, fuck you way. Like when she renamed, what was it? Something like, oh, Western America, the Northwestern Mexico. Because remember that?
Yeah.
And how he never gave her shit for that because he like secretly like really respects that kind of like, like, oh yeah, well, how about this? I wonder what he thinks about all the memes that the Iranians are pumping.
I really want to know if he's watching the video.
Me too. And you know what? The thing that I
also want to know where the videos are coming from. It can't just be Iran. Like something is going on here. Like, man,
it's like this is what everybody says about Iran: sophisticated society, like and a bunch of liberal, tech-savvy people are pissed, man. They might hate the regime, but they're fucking pissed. They're getting bombed by Israel and America. And this is why I always disagree with this view that Israel can bomb Iran into a change of regime. No way is that going to happen. But anyways, look, all I'm saying is one of the things that I do think I love the most about Trump, like if I had to rank things that like Trump is good at, it's that he does respect good television. When Zelensky stood up to him, I think you were right about Zelensky. I'm going to have to eat some crow and put him on my list. Trade value absolutely skyrocketed. Yeah, crushed it. He crushed it. And I think, and you know what? He knew how to gain respect from Trump. he got that right. And I think that secretly, man, 100% he's watching all these memes. And I think 100% he's not getting angry at them. He's chuckling inside. Particularly, did you see the baby meme? Where the baby keeps touching the Strait of Hormuz and somebody keeps saying no. Dude, you haven't seen this meme?
I haven't seen that one. I just have the one on, I have the one on repeat, your government's run by pedophiles. That song is stuck in my head constantly. I'm basically waking up with that song in my head.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, listen, hat tip to the Islamic Republic of Iran for their memes. That's very well done.
Yeah, if anyone from the IRGC is listening, Cousins would love a Lego video of themselves. Like, can we see what you got?
Number one, yes, and please feel free to overrepresent our ethnicities, and you know exactly what I mean by this. Like,
yeah, I'm happy to be your little Satan. Make it as vicious as you want. I'm here for you. It's
yes,
good.
and I can be like your, I don't know what it is.
You'll literally be Slobodan Milosevic. That's what you can be.
Yes. No, look, I mean, by the way, did you know that Serbia offered aid to UAE? They have a very close relationship. UAE has invested a ton in Serbia, which is good. They're buying low for the long term. Smart move. And then it was like, but you guys don't have air defense systems and stuff, like in bulk. And so the Serbian president, God bless him, he was just like, we'll come and fight. And I was like, there is nothing more than the return of the Ottoman Empire than Serbs becoming the Janissaries of old. And by the way, I'm just going to say it to Iran, like, man, like, do you really want to fuck with a bunch of Jokic's? Like, I think it's a good move. I think this is
where Iran calls up North Korea and says, "Hey, we know you sent some to Russia. Can you send some down here? We need some.
I'll take my people over Koreans in a war." Actually, fuck that. I'm taking that back. I think it's a close. I mean, like in basketball, yeah, that's like 100%. But this isn't basketball.
I think it might be. I mean, I think everybody dies.
I think it's a draw, man. Like it's a draw, but like a bad draw. Like you said, everyone's dead. Yeah, Korea versus Serbia. Like this is I mean shit. That would be okay, fine. I'm backing out of that one. I'm backing out of that one.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that incredibly prescient note, I think we will see y'all later this week with the trade value index.